Okay, good morning, and this is Saturday, May 6, 2017. We welcome you to our Saturday morning Bible study class at the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. We are recording from Plainfield, New Jersey, in the United States of America. And today our moderator is Mike from New York. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. So the quote from Mrs. Eddy today is, Genesis and the Apocalypse seem more obscure than other portions of the Scripture because they cannot possibly be interpreted from a material standpoint. To the author, they are transparent, for they contain the deep divinity of the Bible. That was from Science and Health, the Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, page 546.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes, and I was thinking concerning this in other Bible studies when we're talking about Elijah or Daniel. Mrs. Eddy doesn't write a lot on these other prophets, except for Christ Jesus and perhaps Paul. But when it comes to Genesis and Revelation, there's no other source to turn to. She's the only one, just as she explained here, it's transparent and clear to her. She understood it, and that's why she devoted a chapter to each one, and we can be so grateful to her and for her deep understanding of these two, perhaps more difficult Bible chapters to understand. So thank you, Mike, for finding that.
I have to say amen to what you just said, because I tried looking in some commentaries but very much failed miserably.
That's so true, yes. Yeah, they don't get it like she got it. That's true of Revelation as well. So
it feels like it even brings you deeper into the dream when you try to do it from that point, too.
That's true. There's no one who could explain it like her, which shows her spirituality. And that includes Matthew Henry and many of these that, normally come up with some really good, clear thoughts. But these two chapters, she says, they cannot possibly be interpreted from a material standpoint, but they are transparent to her because they contain the deep divinity of the Bible. So
There's actually a passage from our lesson that said the same thing, where it said about one who interpreted the Scriptures in the true sense. And I know she's writing of herself there.
yes, she is.
In the Red Book, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's hit me so strong all week. We can't be thankful enough for what was given by Mary Baker Eddy. There's no other source for these things that were given to us. A true correct interpretation of Scriptures. Okay, I'm done. Go ahead.
That was fine. Thank you. I was just going to say, I was going to read a little bit from the Red Book, which is a collection of miscellaneous writings that they have of Mrs. Eddy's that were unpublished. And one of them, she's speaking of Genesis. And after she refers to the Bible as the foundation of truth in all things, she goes on to say, quote, "The book of Genesis has an importance to which no other document pretends. It is not only the oldest book that is trustworthy history, but it's the only one that contains the clear, concise statement of the supremacy of spirit over matter, as when the eternal us said, 'Let us make man, and let us make him the image and likeness of spirit, not matter.'" End quote.
Thank you.
What page is that on?
See, page 11.
Thank you.
Of the Blue Book, right?
Red Book.
Red Book, okay.
Any other comments on that? I do want to thank the lesson writer, because it definitely was a wonderful lesson using the Key to this Science and Health to illuminate this whole subject. So the topic for today is God's real idea, and the readings were Genesis 1 and also the section that pertains to that, and the chapter Genesis in the Science and Health. First question, what is a brief outline of Genesis 1 up to this phrase, in the sixth day of creation, let us make man in our image?
The first day, I was wondering if maybe we could split that one up a little bit. The first day was light. Let there be light. And he separated the light from the dark and called the light day with a capital D and night with a capital N. Then the firmament was created next, the second day, in the midst of the waters to divide the waters above and from the waters below, and he called the firmament heaven with a capital H. And then he the third day, gathered the waters together, called them seas, and the dry land earth with a capital E, and then let the grass grow, and the herb and the trees with the fruit, and the, what's the word about it? It was the seed in themselves. The seed was in itself. Does anybody okay, number 4, anybody else want to finish this?
You're doing just fine.
Okay, here goes. Number 4 was lights in the firmament. The greater was for the day, and the lesser was for the night, and then created the stars. That was day 4. And 5 was the moving creatures. And I found that so interesting that he called it the moving creatures, the ones that would swim in the ocean and the ones that would fly in the air. And then on day 6, it was the beasts on the earth, and then, of course, the male and female having dominion over it all. And if I left anything out, please jump in.
Thank you, Betty. Of course, this is an intimate subject. How can you say it?
Well, one of the things that is very important that Mrs. Eddy points out, and it appears under actually Jehovah in the glossary, and she mentions it elsewhere, the difference between Elohim, which is the God of Genesis 1, and then it turns into Lord God, Jehovah. The difference being that Elohim is pluralistic, and in Delmelo's commentary it says Elohim, the word probably signifies strength. The Hebrew word is plural in form. The plural form may be used to express the variety of attributes and powers which are combined in the divine nature. That was about the only thing that I found in a commentary outside of Mrs. Eddy that I really liked.
Thank you.
It just came to me about that plurality, better express the usness, express that infinity, the omnipresence and omniscience and omnipotence of God.
And I found it helpful in the optional reading is to go through this in Science and Health. It's a lot longer, but she goes into detail as to what is happening, and this is the spiritual creation. And some of the side notes, are interesting too to note. Spiritual harmony, mind's ideas faultless, light preceding the sun, exalted thought, unfolding thought, spirit names and blesses, divine propagation, ever-appearing creation, geology of failure. She goes through and goes into each one and gives the spiritual creation in which God created all. And he saw that it was very, very good. And truly we should be so familiar with this, that this is the creation that we are seeing and acknowledging. This also goes back to, we've talked about in Martha Wilcox, her chapter, Scientific Translation. This is where Martha Wilcox gets that from. She talks about the worm, the rock. She gives them spiritual identities, which is beautiful to think. Even the tireless worm, spiritually interpreted rocks and mountains stand for solid and grand ideas. And how spirit is blessing the multiplication of its own pure and perfect ideas. And then from the elements of the one mind emanate all form, color, quality, and quantity. And these are mental, both primarily and secondarily. So, because some people think, well, without the so-called matter, what would that look like? It would look like a big void. No, she's saying not at all. It has color, form, quality, quantity. And one I want to mention, because I don't think, it's not in the lesson where we will talk about it tomorrow at the round table, but it's on page 514 to 515. It is handling the belief of pests. And I'm bringing it out because goodness knows all of this talk of mosquitoes and ticks and other things, it needs to be wiped out. It is a false mesmeric belief, just as you saw on the forum where Parthen showed you someone thinking they were in the Olympics, 3 people, and it was all hypnosis. So, Mary, you read from there to there. This is pages 514 to 515, and it deals with these passages that Mike brought out.
Understanding the control which love held over all, Daniel felt safe in the lion's den, and Paul proved the viper to be harmless. All of God's creatures, moving in the harmony of science, are harmless, useful, indestructible. A realization of this grand verity was a source of strength to the ancient worthies. It supports Christian healing and enables its possessor to emulate the example of Jesus. Quote, "And God saw that it was good," end quote. Patience is symbolized by the tireless worm, creeping over lofty summits, persevering in its intent. The serpent of God's creating is neither subtle nor poisonous, but is a wise idea, charming in its adroitness. For love's ideas are subject to the mind which forms them, the power which changes the serpent into a staff.
Now, isn't that beautiful? That is the truth of our creation. We are to work with this in our watches. We are to banish this belief that of pests, and then that they spread disease. And this isn't something that's just gone on now. It's gone on for a long, long time. So how could it? You take those passages and work with them. Paul proved the viper harmless, and we can too. The false belief, it has no power, but just as we've talked about, you think, oh, it has power, and then everybody's scared of it, and everyone ends up worshiping it, and in belief it seems to be going on. Also, on page 341, Lessons of the Seventh Day, mosquitoes are an attack of mortal mind, using our consciousness to annoy us. A belief of pests does not exist. Correct it, prove it, and then it blesses us. This is a good opportunity if you ever have any pests in your home, whatever they call themselves, mice, whatever, ants, to work with this. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take other action if you need to, which means pesticides. But you first you do this, and if you do it properly, it will banish it, wipe it out. No plague shall come nigh thy dwelling. They have a place, but it's not in your bed or in your house or anywhere else. like that. But it needs to be handled. And I don't know of any other peoples that can do it, except in Christian Science. Mrs. Eddy's understanding of it. Okay, thank you. Anyone else on those pages? They're wonderful. You could spend hours on those pages in Science and Health and in the Bible.
Yes, I do want to say that in exploring light and lights, I found it rather interesting that the word light in any form does not reappear. It only is in Genesis 1, and it doesn't reappear until the end of Genesis. And there's two different usages when you go to Strong's. One is illuminating object, and the other one, which is the two lights, it actually means luminaries. And what was very interesting to me was Strong says that it's a feminine term. So, in other words, I couldn't find anything. I didn't look at all the words, but that was the first attachment of gender was feminine that I found in my studies this week.
Thank you. Well, there's one other thing Luann, talking about color. You know, Luann has, well, it would appear to have passed on and come back. And what did you say about color, Luann?
I had a feeling you'd call on me this morning.
Well, you were right.
When I was passed on, so to speak, there was tremendous colors, but the colors weren't the same as that we see with our eyes here on Earth. They were so much more, I wouldn't say brighter, but stronger, more opalescent, and I have trouble, like when I paint and stuff, to even paint those colors because there's no colors like them on Earth. They come with like a meaning or a sense, but they're not the same as just a pigment of paint. They represent things. When I passed on and I saw these colors, it overwhelmed my eyes, my understanding of what they were.
Thank you.
And can you imagine how life here would be if you understood that the colors that you see here are mental and that they mean something?
Brightness and the glory that brings. And also, I mean, people have spoken about the bright lights that they see if they passed on. Well, I mean, in a way, the first Genesis, the true creation, it's describing the New Jerusalem, which John saw on earth, and we can too. And Luann isn't the only one. I've read other things, people who've passed on and come back who've said this about light, colors. That's why we know it exists. And as we grow in our science, this world should grow all the more beautiful and vivid and lovely. And the lion does lie down with the lamb. And nothing is harmless, harmful, useful, harmless, indestructible. All of God's creation, Mrs. Eddy said. So let's start seeing this here now. No reason why we can't.
That there's only one creation, and I know there's one phrase that seems to repeat itself through Genesis, and it is, after his kind. So every step was made after his kind. Just so there's any question about what the nature of this creation is, it's divine and godly, and that's all.
Thank you. Very
I have
important. Go ahead.
Sorry. I have a question. if I got it right, tell me please. When I read in Science and Health where Mrs. Eddy explains Earth, does she say that it becomes spiritual sense? If I got that right, then in the Beatitudes, when it says the meek inherit the earth, they're inheriting spiritual sense.
Well, the spiritual sense that enables you to see all of this. That's
Okay.
the God-given quality that we need to cultivate. I don't know if that's your question. Go ahead.
Well, the definition in the glossary says to material sense, earth is matter. To spiritual sense, it is a compound idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. The earth is whatever you perceive reality to be.
And in the second day, he made firmament, which is defined as spiritual sense, spiritual understanding, and the line that draws between the real and the unreal. That's our God-given right to have that firmament or spiritual sense. Sorry, Gary.
No. Remember, this is written in a human language, and it's been translated into English. But it's expressing a divine idea, a divine concept. So it has to be read totally with inspiration. In other words, you can't, the term earth can't mean to you what it means in a human sense in order for you to understand what's being written here. You have to rise above, get out of all the human sense of any of these. I mean, light. What is light? The light is what emanates from the divine mind.
It's illumination.
It's a spiritual illumination. It is the revelation that you receive when truth comes to you. And the reason light is the first, I mean, it says God saw the light. Well, God didn't see the light. God is the light. And what that means is that the divine mind is the source of everything. She makes a point. It doesn't have a beginning. What it means is it's the only. So we're starting out here with a kind of a human description of the fact that the divine mind is all there is. That the divine mind is the source of everything in the universe, including us.
Thank you. I do want to make a quick point, not to belabor, but people can look it up on their own. In Genesis 1, again, it's earth. And then all of a sudden, when it becomes Lord God, they use the word ground and earth once in a while sprinkled in. So I think that's the difference between the spiritual and the material. And Mrs. Eddy does say that in the beginning, Genesis 1 was all spiritual, Adam and Eve is material, and then they stirred and mixed the two together to confuse everybody.
Right. And our job is to unmix and unconfuse.
Wonderful. Shall we go on? Thank you so much. Shall we go on to number 2?
Yes, thank you.
What is the Bible definition of dominion, and how do we gain as intended? Let us make man in our image. I found for dominion was, unfortunately, in the dictionary I looked at, it was very close to domination, which I don't think that's the way it was meant. But then I found the international version, concordance, an order of angels, so a dominion is an order of angels, and I think that starts to turn it into a more spiritual thing, which is what it really should be.
I found sovereign or supreme authority, the power of governing.
What was wrong with domination?
Well, domination, I think, is it depends on who's doing the dominating.
Exactly. It depends on what's
Right.
dominating.
Well,
And
it
I
says
think-
man will have dominion over the earth. Right?
It is made in God's image, yes.
So spiritually,
Right.
does anybody have an inspired idea as to what that means? Does spiritual truth dominate material belief in your life, in your experience?
Yes, it does. I think maybe the problem again, the material approach that people have used is that when they say dominating, they're thinking of all the error dominating. And when it says dominion, I guess, I mean, you're 100% correct. I think I was just trying to separate good dominion of God versus dominating of error, but when used correctly, it's used correctly, and that's all that matters.
Well, this is an inspired writing of God's creation, of what God created. Could God create anything human? Could dominate another human?
I asked my practitioner a few years ago what dominion meant, and she told me that it meant never being a victim, and I always think of it ever since then. So that's been very helpful.
It's a very important point because people think of themselves as victims. That it's just the way it is. They can't do anything about it. God says He's given you dominion, and I looked up dominion to see what things were just given dominion of, and over and over and over. It's over all the earth, over all things. On 228, on Science and Health, it says over the material senses. 125 in Science and Health, the seasons will come and go with the changes of time and tide and cold, heat, latitude, and longitude. The agriculturalist will find that these changes cannot affect his crops. As a vesture shalt thou change them, and they shall be changed. The mariner will have dominion over the atmosphere and the great deep, over the fish of the sea, and over the fowls of the air. The astronomer will no longer look up to the stars, for he will look out from them upon the universe. And the florist will find the flower before the seed. Thus matter will finally be proved nothing more than a mortal belief. Now, that is having dominion. Do you? And if not, let's exercise more of this dominion in our life. Not willfully, but it's something God-given. And as you are obedient to Him, and that's the key, because this isn't just something you can willfully demand. You've got to be in rhythm, in sync with the Father, letting Him use you. You will have this dominion, just as the prophets did. Jesus fed the multitude with the loaves and the fishes. But there was no whining that, I have no food, I'm a helpless victim. I mean, seriously. and so many people are proving this, have proved it, and are proving it. So don't be one that's not.
what you read before about the mosquitoes. Dominion over
Dominion
it.
over the mosquitoes. Enough of this. You know, every year we're hearing some other something. Dominion over germs. Dominion over wars. Dominion over your husband who bosses you around. I couldn't resist.
And you do that so well.
Well, anything that would try to knock you down or put you out, put you in a corner. Go ahead.
And the medical.
Yes, absolutely.
They say they have all the power. They can control everything.
Perfect. Thank you. And that's why I tell people if you have to go anywhere, to a dentist or anything like that, you go in with the authority of Christ. You don't go in as a helpless victim. You know your metaphysics. You go in there with the authority of Christ. In a sick room, you go in with the authority of Christ. Dominion over all things. We've only scratched the surface on this. And it is being proven. And there are many, we've had many healings. I remember once someone whose husband had to go on this long boat trip and storms and things like that, and they were getting prayer, and the storms were quelled. And this is recent. This isn't back in the, Jesus' time. And there was a testimony given a while ago about someone who had gotten sick eating fish or shellfish or something, and the practitioner used that they would have dominion over the fish, was healed of it. Had healings of poison ivy. Certainly have healings of lack of supply. Luann will give a testimony soon about. But there have been so many healings, current healings.
Examples of the dominion that is available to all of us because it is of God. It's not a human thing.
For allergies.
Yes, all of this, absolutely. That's another big one. Allergies. There's something in the air or something you eat that afflicts you. It doesn't. You give it power. You give it the only power it has, and it has none. God didn't say that. That's not what this first chapter is about. But the mist came up, and the mist is your false education. You're free of good and knowledge, evil. Free of, what is it? Good and evil, that you want to study those medical books and Google all your problems and think about them until they become very real to you.
And give them a cause.
Give them a cause, give them substance. Your matter has no cause, no law, no substance. Your substance is spirit.
The reason we have the dominion is because God made us in her image. That means all of the things that God is are you expressed. That's the truth about you. The reason you have dominion over all these false beliefs is because God has dominion over all these false beliefs. God is too pure to know evil. As his image and likeness, so are you. As his image and likeness.
That's why Christ says we must become as a little child, because they're so innocent and pure, and they're not contaminated with all these false beliefs. In order to enter the kingdom, we must become as a little child. Pure, innocent, trusting the Father. And all of this, we can't claim any of this if we are living in disobedience to God. As last week's lesson said, there's no security if you're living in disobedience with God. And this is what's so appalling when people declare, they're perfect in God. In the meantime, they're doing all kinds of things that are against God's law and against His commandments. You cannot do that. It will not work. God is not mocked, as this week's lesson says. You cannot be a hypocrite and expect these results.
I'd like to read from the third edition of Science and Health, which really pertains to exactly what Gary said. And the wording is just a little different than the modern. And remember, when I use the word us, is right here, it's capitalized. What Mrs. Eddy wrote then was, in spirit, the eternal us made man. This plurality of spirit does not apply more than one God, the three persons in one. It means life, truth, and love. These one spirit, divine Trinity, the only creator.
Okay, thank you. Another we must make sure we are exercising is of course the dominion over the elements, the dominion over weather. We're to be working on that every day for our community, or your community, and the nation and the world. Mrs. Eddy has people in her home working on it every day. And she said, if you cannot control the weather, you are not a Christian Scientist. And dominion over sin, disease, and death. All things. So if you ever think you are stuck in a corner and don't have dominion, then you better rethink the situation. You personally don't have dominion, of course, but God has that dominion, and as His image and likeness, you do too.
So it makes it clear where we have to turn in order to gain the dominion that we need. We don't turn to person. We don't turn to some other organization.
Can very nicely turn to Plainfield Services or call a practitioner to get us right back in our rights, understanding of dominion. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yep. Ultimately, what it does is it reconnects you, or better connects you, to the one source, God. That's how it works.
And that's why, we often give out those pages, 390 to 393. That's what it's all about. Rise in rebellion. It's claiming your dominion over all things. And they're very, very important pages in Science and Health. They're the command statements. So when you're feeling like you can't do something, you study and work with those and know through God, you can claim that dominion over it.
You stomp your foot and you say, yes, I can do it with God's help, and then do it.
Don't
May
try.
I say something here?
Please do.
A couple of years ago, I had a situation where we were having tornadoes down here, and it was in minutes of my home, and I had called my practitioner and asked for help. It came within 3 minutes of my home, and I had the radio on, and they were giving you one thing at a time, just telling you how terrible this was and how close it was to the Galleria down here and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the weatherman said, "Oh, it disappeared. We don't know what happened. It just disappeared." That's dominion.
Thank you, Elsie.
Thank you, Elsie.
And Elsie's always telling me, because she's in Alabama where they do have some strange weather patterns at times, she's always working on the weather. She has a old cornerstone, it was a cornerstone at that point, that dealt with the weather articles she keeps with her to study and work with. She does it faithfully. And I know you've heard, I don't know if Elizabeth's on, but she's given a testimony about their down in South Carolina when a storm was approaching and their rental home was right in the way of it. But it stopped, miraculously stopped. she was receiving help. And this goes on and on. That's why anyone who says, well, why isn't Christian Science working today? Why aren't these healings going on? I just want to wring your neck. Honestly, I have no patience for that. Yes, open your eyes, get out of the human mind and see what God is doing. For God's sake, see it. Please. Or don't tell me. I've heard it once too often, okay? So, excuse my my outburst.
Enthusiasm.
Well, thank you. But to me, that is an offense to God, and that's why it bothers me. It's not an offense to me, but to God Almighty for what He is doing, what He has doing, what He always will do. And Mrs. Hetty says, you don't take an offense unless the offense be to God, and that is. So, yes, Lillian said, wake up, open your eyes, see what's happening, smell the coffee, whatever. But it's going on, and you darn well better. If you're naming that name of Christian Science and you aren't seeing healing all around you, you need to get new glasses. No, I'm only kidding. You need to see clearly what's happening. Behold. Have you ever noticed how many times in the Bible it's behold, behold, behold? Well, what is that? It's seeing God's creation. Genesis 1. Okay, I'll behave myself.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you for that rant. That was wonderful. Number 3. How were both female and male made in God's own image?
It's an interesting way to ask a question, right? Only God knows how He made it, everything. But can you explain what you meant by the question?
Well, that got reworded several times, so I guess I wasn't quite clear on how to word it. So what I was looking for was, I think even as a child in Sunday school, the whole thing about Adam and the rib is just absolutely nonsensical. So what I was looking for is that I can't see, especially when it says when God made male and female, it's together as one. So I just wanted to make sure that instead of saying man and then somebody thinking that was just the masculine, I wanted to make sure that so we included everybody in that question. So that would be generic man, but divided into male and female to make sure that we don't leave out anybody.
So, like, how could both female and male be God's image?
Exactly, as opposed to having man-made and then that artificial story about the rib being turned into a woman.
Okay, Bruce will read from Watch's Prayers and Arguments. What page is this?
Page 92. Argument. This is my support, that the male and female natures are equally expressed, coexistent in me. This is the way that I exist, and is the reason that I never lack. It is because I am of the nature of infinite completeness. There is never anything in my experience in which the male and female qualities are not infinitely at one, supporting each other. It is because my spiritual inspiration is perfectly balanced with scientific understanding, because my joy is perfectly balanced with courage, and because my love is perfectly balanced with strength. My tender emotional nature is perfectly balanced with thought, reason, and understanding. Therefore, I am a state of perfect perfection, perfect protection, perfect substance, and I am supported by my own infinity. I am the consciousness of infinity. I am the presence of substance, because there is no unsupported idea in me. My manhood takes takes care of my womanhood, defends, protects, and supports her. My joy is defended and protected by my courage. My love is protected and defended by my understanding, by the strength of my scientific understanding, which is omnipotence. I am never undefended, and my womanhood cherishes my manhood. My tender affection cherishes my scientific understanding and unfolds love to it, takes care of it, watches over it with love, and gives it every opportunity to unfold and demonstrate itself in perfect harmony, unity, equality, and unfoldment. So, my nature is complete.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Where was that again?
Watches, Prayers, and Arguments, page 92. You should all be familiar with that. She's not talking about two people, is she?
No.
One. You are complete in God. That's why I know I used to, years ago, think, more of my feminine nature. But that doesn't work, because then you think you need a man to take care of you. That does not work. Okay, it doesn't work. We talked about that last week. So you've got to feel complete within yourself. And your feminine nature defends the masculine defends the feminine. It's a completeness. And you don't just claim one side. All things, strength, courage, beauty, joy, all the things that God is, you are. Completeness. And in that completeness, there's no loneliness, there's no lack or void. There's only all of God's good with you. We will talk more about this at the round table.
So when it says, God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him, talking about generic man, all man. Male and female created he them, means God created all of us with both male and female qualities.
You can certainly see Jesus Christ expressing all the qualities, Mrs. Eddy expressing all qualities, and also on 508 in the chapter on Genesis, she talks about that gender means simply kind or sort and does not necessarily refer either to masculinity or femininity. The word is not confined to sexuality, and grammars always recognize a neuter gender, neither male nor female. The mind or intelligence of production names the female gender last in the ascending order of creation. The intelligent individual idea, be it male or female, rising from the lesser to the greater, unfolds the infinitude of love. This is why it's so important to be familiar with this chapter on Genesis, so you have correct identification of yourself. And then we are all without what?
We don't lack any.
We don't lack, and we're all without excuse. No excuses as to what your problem is. Mrs. Eddy said, excuses are intolerable. So when you find yourself excusing yourself as to why you're this, that, or the other thing,
Or excusing anybody else.
or excusing
Your
anybody
family.
else, yep, you got to catch that. Martha Wilcox speaks to it very directly in her chapter, The Definition of Intelligence. Excuses will lead you either into a hospital or an insane asylum. And I'm sure none of you want to go there. Because what are you excusing?
Fine.
You are.
Mistake.
A mistake, an error. You're saying that there's a reason that you're miserable.
Saying you don't have dominion.
You don't have dominion, and you are a victim.
It's called being in the human mind.
Yes, it is. That
It's
wraps
your
it up.
choice.
Yes. So don't excuse. Watch your excuses. If God tells you not to do something, that's fine. But if God is telling you to do something and you make all these excuses as to why you shouldn't, that is not fine. Excuses like, I'm too shy. I never gave a testimony in my life. I don't know. Go on and on and on.
There's that song, Excuses, and everything.
Yeah, we used to sing that. One of Mrs. Evans' favorite. Excuses, excuses. You hear them every day, and then they list all these excuses. I once thought I would write a book on excuses because I hear them, and I've certainly given them too. So they are. When you look at excuses that way, they are very laughable. When you write them down and see really what it's telling you. So. Anyone else? We haven't had a lot of people talking today.
Well, I did want to just add when we're talking about when seems like God's telling you to do something or not, or if you don't know, we should use common sense, So,
If you're spiritual,
sometimes we don't use common sense. That seems to be the hallmark of a Christian Scientist from Boston. Well, I think the problem there is that your common sense comes from God. Too much of my common sense comes from elsewhere. That's where I run into problems. I think for not understanding the question fully, you didn't make excuses and answered it perfectly. So I really appreciate that.
Well, and when you're not sure if you're hearing God's voice, you just do the best you can, and you'll learn from either that you did the right thing or it was a mistake, and you'll learn from it. But
right.
Do something.
Right, and then this here really affirms that I was on the right track, but that's why the question was asked, so now I know. Hopefully others too.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're all learning. Okay, nobody's fully arrived, so don't feel bad if you don't always know. Nobody always knows.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all learning.
And Mrs. Eddy once said when she had a decision to make and it wasn't clear to her, she did the best she could, and based on the decision that she did make, it led her to see whether it was the right decision, or sometimes it led her to see that the other way was the right decision, and she was able to change course with the confidence that she knew this is what God wanted to do.
Thank you. Wonderful.
So don't be afraid to take the first step and listen to what God says about it.
Well, I feel great about this. I really appreciate it. Shall we move to number 4?
Thank you.
Sure.
What does be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it mean?
Someone who hasn't spoken, please.
What does it mean to you?
I looked up some of the words. Be fruitful, and I looked up in the Webster's 1828. Be fruitful is to be productive. And then to multiply, Mrs. Eddy says, and it's in the lesson this week, divine love blesses its own ideas and causes them to multiply, to manifest His power. And then replenish, it says it means to fill, finish, complete. And it made me think of what Jesus said in Matthew 5:17. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And then subdue means to bring into permanent subjection.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Dale. Suzanne. Yeah, we always like to call on
I think this is a perfect example of dominion because when you turn to God and you have His dominion, you can be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth, and then you subdue all the erroneous beliefs.
Thank you. Good.
I think the watches are a perfect example of that because every time you say a watch, work at this and that, you are fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it.
That's a beautiful thought. Thank you, Karen. That is just beautiful. Explain the watch. See, all you have such good ideas. Now, Suzanne hasn't. We haven't heard from her. She's still there.
Oh, I'm here. I think, subdue it has always been kind of perverted, that we can kind of trash the earth any way we want. But, I see subdue more as keeping the so-called laws of matter underneath your foot, and because the earth is going to be everything positive if you respect it. And like for instance, what we've done with animals on farms when they're chopping up all their body parts so that we can process them faster. There's a farmer up here who lets her cows live their entire lives and doesn't cut the horns or do any of those things, and her observations are beautiful. Her calves, her cows calve easily. Her animals calve for many years, and she said they are strong and disease-free. I mean, she respects the beauty of the creation, and the result is incredibly healthy, incredibly easy calving animals that live a very long time. And this is rare, but she sends these emails with photos, and I thought, I've always wondered why we have to tinker with nature, because the creation is so beautiful when we work with it, not against it. That's just my kind of my
That's it's a very good thought. It's a fresh thought, and it's absolutely right.
And I have to back you up as having been a farmer, and when you do all the official record keeping, we were one of the highest as far as longevity, that we were nothing as what you describe. And I know that now, and that's one of my deep regrets of what I had done, was not right.
Thank you. And that is a beautiful thought, to work with nature, with creation, but how can we improve on what God has done? And so it is. I
think the key word is replenish. That's so important because we're bringing it back to where it was or better.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes. And that also does away with waste and abuse, as Suzanne says, abusing what God has given us. And you see so much of it. So we respect God's creation. Let it does replenish itself when left without man tinkering, as it says. But wonderful thought. Tom, do you have any more that you want to say?
Well, we talked about dominion. I thought that we don't have dominion without being a servant of God. That's where we start.
Very good. Servant. Isn't that interesting? You have dominion by being a servant.
Because God gives us the dominion.
And we are humble and serve Him.
Yeah.
If we think we're going to be prominent and dominant and king of the land, then we don't get it. It's only in serving that we get it. The human mind doesn't understand that. What about Amanda? Do you have anything before we close?
Well, I don't know that it's new to what has already been discussed, but specifically with what we've been talking about in question 4, I started with kind of the old theological approach and tried to work backwards because it doesn't seem that the literal reading of it and what old theology accepts for that phrase could be correct in any way of what the intention was here, even in this earthly experience. And so I started just by going back and looking at some of the old Hebrew texts, what the definitions of the words fruitful and multiply and so forth were. And I don't have all of my notes, but the concept that came was that fruitful and multiply is kind of coming back to moving our way out of this experience in matter. Being fruitful and multiply is to expand our true knowledge, to branch off from what seems to be this human experience and increase our understanding of the truth. And we talked about the definition of subdue. I think Dale had it to conquer with superior power and dominion. And so through our understanding, we are conquering this experience, what seems to be in matter, until the truth of what really is revealed. And undoing that myth of creation from Genesis 2 and to our true understanding of Genesis 1.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to add anything? Well, those were mighty fine questions, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all.
Thank you.